I grew up in the backwoods of Washington State. My family lived on a 5-acre plot of land. More than half the property was covered by dense woods that expanded past our property lines for miles. My entire childhood was spent in those woods with my brother, playing, climbing trees, and catching frogs at the ponds. It was everything two boys could ask for. One late summer night, I believe my twin and I were about 8, I heard someone screaming outside, far off in the woods. I was the only one to hear it because I had my window open. It scared me to my core. I've heard screams before, but they were from coyotes. This was different. I went to my brother's room and opened the window to see if he could hear it as well. Sure enough, he did. Not wanting to bother our parents, we decided not to say anything. After about a week of these screams, we decided to tell our parents. Our parents told us it was probably coyotes, and it was nothing to be afraid of. The screams every day sounded like they were getting closer to the house. Then outdoor toys went missing. I wasn't able to find my skateboard I left outside one night. My brother's bike was taken, and our favorite pool inflatables were gone. We told our parents again about the screams, and now our toys were gone. Of course, they said the screams were coyotes and that our stuff went missing because we don't take care of them and probably got lost. The screams were getting so loud and so close that I stopped sleeping with my window open. But there was one night that I could hear yelling that sounded closer than ever before. I peered out the window, and what I saw sent shivers down my spine and paralyzed me with fear. Just outside my second-floor bedroom window that looked over the backyard into the edge of the woods, I saw the finger of a slender person. Even from my window, I could see the moon reflecting off the whites of their eyes, large and bulging out of the sockets, the eyes fixed on the house, unmoving. It was a man who stood a foot taller than the tall wooden fence that separated the backyard from the trees. His gaze slowly shifted toward to my window. He caught sight of me. Slowly with the slender legs, he made his way across the fence to the gate. Oh no, he's coming my way. What do I do? I thought. He's getting closer. I can't move. He was close enough for me to see his face clearly now. His mouth opened wide, an expression of surprise on his face because of just how much his eyes bulged from his sockets. So much so that I couldn't even imagine how he could blink. A head decorated with tufts of hair. Most of his scalp was bare, seemed as though his hair was pulled out. His clothes were tattered and dirty. He wasn't wearing any shoes. He stepped right under my window and stared at me. His eyes unmoving, unblinking. His mouth open like a perpetual scream, but was silent. I'm not sure how long we stared at each other. Felt like minutes. Frozen in fear until a blood-curdling scream, coming from a face that was still unmoving and unblinking, emanated from his mouth. That broke the hold of my body. I jumped back from the window, ran straight to my brother's room. He had heard it as well. We busted into our parents' room, screaming and crying. They assumed I had a bad nightmare and scared my brother. No matter how much I pleaded, they would not believe me. The last week of summer was the worst of them all. The man with the bulging eyes would stare at me from the tree line at night. Every once in a while, I would see him during the day, but every time I yelled for someone to come over, he would disappear. When school started up, I was relieved to not be at home all the time. It was a stressful time. I started hearing and seeing the man less and less. I started to think that maybe it was my imagination that conjured up this image. My parents might have been right. As a kid, I had quite the imagination. However, on a late Tuesday night, there was a knock at the front door. The thought of the screaming man came into my mind. Could he be knocking? Could he be coming to take me? My father answered the door and greeted the cop. The cop explained that the neighbors called 911 for someone breaking into their pool house. The officer told my father that the man had been living in the woods for a few months and that if anything went missing over the summer, then it might be found at the camp the intruder had set up. I went out the back door to catch a glimpse of the man that broke into my neighbor's property. Putting my face up near the car window to peer into the dark cop car, a face slowly inched closer to the other side of the glass. Eyes bright, white and bulging, mouth ajar, and tufts of hair becoming visible. It was the screaming man from the summer. When I was 17, my parents were in the process of building their first greenhouse. It wasn't very big, but it was functional. We used it to grow plants like snapdragon, basil, tomatoes, strawberries, and so much more. They had also recently added a few fruit trees, mostly peaches and apples, but there were 2 other fruit trees that hadn't been planted in the outside earth yet. They were infamous for dying off randomly, so we were keeping them in the greenhouse to hopefully stabilize. One shelf of the greenhouse contained the plants that my teenage self was obsessed with and subsequently cared for. 4 potted dusty millers, 3 potted purple-white pansies, a succulent, and a mimicry plant that looked like a horseshoe. Still had no idea what the hell kind of plant that is. Next to the greenhouse was a little fenced patch of dirt that my mom planned to use for crops once they began sprouting. For some context, I've lived south of the Appalachian Mountains my whole life. Close enough that I'm scared to leave my house at night, but far enough that I'd never personally heard anything before this incident. I always take my dogs with me when I venture outside. One of my big dogs, War, always wears a GPS tracking collar because he can and will disappear for hours, and it's terrifying to think we might never see him again. This kind of collar had an electric field that warns him against leaving the yard. Now, back to the actual story. It was about 6 in the afternoon on an early spring day, so the sun was relatively low in the sky. I was inside the greenhouse, watering my shelf of plants. My dogs were much closer to the house than me, so I was basically in the woods alone. The greenhouse is barely 10 feet from the tree line. As I'm caring for the plants, I hear cracking in the woods. I freeze, knowing there was no one else around me. Then, it starts. Horrible sounds coming from the woods. It sounded like a horse trying to mimic a child's screams of joy. But it was wrong. Too high-pitched, too scratchy, and it kept looping in this strange way. The sounds made my hair on my arms stand straight up. But overall, it was far too close for my superstitious teenage self. I knew the rules by heart. I finished watering the plant I was looking at, pretended to check the others, and deemed them fine, then began quietly putting things back where they belong. The greenhouse was covered in fogged up plastic, so anything out there would have seen nothing but my shadow. I carefully left the greenhouse, locking the door behind me. I wasted no time in climbing the hill towards the house, not looking back. My dog, War, noticed me and started walking towards me. Out of nowhere, he began sprinting and snarling. It was the first and only time I had feared my dog. He's always been a giant baby, but that day, I felt nothing but instinctual fear. Before I could react, he was gone. He had disappeared into the woods, and he vanished for 6 days. I honestly thought whatever I heard had done him in. He eventually showed back up, and now he has a nasty scar on his left eye. The vet told us it wouldn't interfere with his sight, but it was very noticeable. To this day, he stays close enough to touch me whenever I get near the greenhouses. There was only one other time he ever reacted though. When I looked, I could have sworn I saw a goat staring at me. Funny, considering there is not a single goat in my very sparse neighborhood. I, 21 male, have been born and raised in the US state of Maine my entire life. I have lived near the coast, in the city, and for the past 2 years, I have been living in the middle of the woods with my grandparents. A very desolate spot between two semi-populated towns in central Maine, with little to no neighbors. It is undeniably beautiful. I have been coming to this exact house since I was born, and I've always noticed something off about the woods. Never felt a feeling of danger, just that I was being observed. Over the years, I had grown accustomed to it and forgot about it after I had moved during the pandemic. But now, it's back. I noticed it during my first night sleeping there. Stacks of boxes still in my new room, and shitty curtains hung on the wall haphazardly to ensure a sense of security. At 4:32 in the morning, I woke up to what I thought was a radio, right outside my door. The house had an old integrated radio speaker system wired into every room of the house, but it had not been connected for 2 decades. All I thought about those radios, I kept listening to what was playing. A genre of music I had never heard sung in a language that I didn't recognize. I had always heard tales of Wendigo and skinwalkers here in Maine, and the newly released, at the time, Mandela catalog YouTube horror series wasn't helping the paranoia. I kept listening. At exactly 5:30, the noises stopped, and the sun rose. I had never felt so scared in that house prior to that moment. Several months pass, and my grandfather gets sent to a veteran's home due to his worsening condition. So now, it is just myself and my grandmother. My grandfather would sometimes mention how he hears music in a language he didn't understand, but I just associated that with his dementia. My grandmother would hear it too, but I just didn't think much of it. After some time, it was October of 2024. No major activity that disturbed or spooked myself or my grandmother, and all was relatively going well. I had been going on walks down the main road at any time of day, and was feeling safe in my environment. Late October, it started to get colder, darker, and overall more desolate. I had been seeing some deer staring at me in my front yard, but looking back on it, I'm not exactly sure what those 6 pale glowing white dots were. They were too high off the ground to be deer. I went out and measured relative to the tree that they were near, and got around 11 feet. The snow kept falling over the coming weeks. The forest got quieter, and the days got shorter. I had heavy night owl tendencies due to my night shifts I used to work, so I would go to bed anywhere from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. Around mid-November is when the noises started. Light scratching on the side of the house, and slow thumping of heavy rhythmic footsteps outside. The tracks looked bipedal with a wide berth. I know bear, moose, deer, and human tracks well. This didn't look like any of those. I would mention it to my neighbors, and they would just ask me to not talk about it. All they would say was be careful. Keep in mind these people had been living here longer than I've been alive. I started doing research and found that the town sat upon old Penobscot tribal land and was a common place for rituals and burials to be held. The sounds got louder and more invasive. The scratching became more of a carving motion, and the slow steps turned into a heavy and agile run. It was angry. I could sense that whatever was here didn't like me. or at least didn't like what I was. It would scuttle across the roof and bang on the doors. And then one day, my grandmother told me she saw it. 2 white glowing dots outside of her window, beaming into her soul from the dark forest at precisely 3 a.m. I immediately burned sage outside and inside the property and made an offering to the spirits of tobacco and chicken bones, in line with the local tribal spiritually. All this sounds like something out of a book or a shitty Netflix drama, but since that day, the weather has warmed up and all the noises have stopped. My depression has gotten better and I don't stay up as late anymore. But every now and then, I still get that feeling of being observed. And last night, as I passed my old room across the hall, I saw something dash outside the window. Shortly after, we got a winter weather advisory. As the snow paints the landscape white, my anxiety grows. Whatever it is, it doesn't seem to hate me. Just more so tolerant of my existence. All I really know about it is that it got worse when the snow fell.